Morning, everybody. And yeah, thanks, Laura, for the LinkedIn embarrassment. But yes, if you haven't spent some time on some of these text to AI video tools, I highly recommend it. It's pretty fun to mess around. And quite a few people were messaging me internally. They're like, oh, what did this cost to get these people to come in and film these? I'm like, these are not real humans. So anyways, it's pretty fun. And thank you to many of you for coming for your first time, and some of you for your fourth time. This is our fourth event, and so the first one was in Chicago, and then the following year we did it in Newport Beach. Last year we did it in Las Vegas, and this year, of course, we're doing it in Dallas, Fort Worth. I was told by my Uber driver on the way here, he's like, "You're not in Dallas, you're in Fort Worth." So I need to be careful there. But you know, I know Mike was talking about some of the ways that he was able to navigate everything from a global supply chain perspective, and I'm really excited to have Alex Yancher here, the CEO and founder of Passport. We've been fortunate to know each other for quite some time. We also fortunately started partnering very closely together before COVID, so we got to spend a lot of in-person time. But yes, very happy to have you here. They're really helping brands unlock any blockers from going global, and that might be not just shipping cross-border, but also shipping in region as well. And so, Alex, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and how about in your words, how would you describe Passport to everybody here in the audience?
So big picture, we help brands go global. And we operate on two models to do that. Some of our brands use both models, some one or the other. One model is a cross-border model. So we ship DDP, we also ship DDU, US outbound, and we recently launched UK, and actually got to meet Enda, your UK representative. Great facility you guys have in UK. So we do UK outbound as well. And the second model is the in-country enablement model that you were referring to. So for that, we help brands set up local operations in country. The fulfillment side is on ShipBob, and our role is to basically be the importer of record and the merchant of record for the brand, so that they don't need to create tax nexus, worry about regulatory compliance, or any of those types of things. We take it upon ourselves to handle that.
Yeah, perfect. Well, we're going to dive exactly into that, into delivered duty paid, delivered duty unpaid, shipping in region. Something that Melissa did mention, along with a lot of the things that we've built from the last Fulfilled and what's coming in the future, is a Spain-based fulfillment center, so Madrid. So just wanted to share that again. So again, opening this month. Again, some of it's in response to some of the global macro changes, and so really excited about this, especially with reaching very important markets such as Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, very quickly as well. So if you guys have any questions on that, again, feel free to grab me or Melissa or some of her team as well. And so as a room of a lot of Americans, I know we have people that have come in from Canada and from multiple other countries, but we're not always personally hit with the pros and cons of DDP and DDU. I remember this was, back in 2015 or 16 or so. I was actually living over in Germany. We had one child at the time. I was at work way too much, and so my wife was there. We ordered something from the US, and she speaks no German, and she's dealing with a 1.5-year-old, and they come to drop something off, and they're like, "Oh, you also owe these additional duties." And she thought that they were just running like a scam on her. She had no idea what was going on, because in the US, again, we mostly order things that are shipped in the US, and so we don't have to deal with that. So maybe if you just want to explain to the audience, I know a lot of them know, but like, how would you break down the simplicities of like DDP versus DDU?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because we, up until now, have had an $800 duty de minimis. So even if somebody in America were to buy something from abroad, it would be most likely under the $800 de minimis, and we wouldn't really know what it means to pay duties upon delivery, right? Well, we're going to find out what happens if we order something from a D2C brand that's based outside of the US. I think the Postal Service is still actually trying to figure out how they're going to handle collecting duties, if they are. So we're going to find out what it really means to be, delivered duty paid or duty unpaid. But for rest of world, the traditional way of shipping, has been delivered duties unpaid, and that's because that's the way the Postal Service does it. Okay. Then maybe about 10 years ago, companies like my company, Passport, started to pop up and to help kind of transform that industry into delivered duties paid. So collecting the duties and the taxes upfront in the shopping cart and shipping it with those Incoterms where the duties have already been prepaid by the broker and the customer gets a seamless experience to the door. What you're referring to, what your wife had to go through, was it must have been shipped delivered duties unpaid, where they basically hold the package at the post office. And I mean, of course, people in Canada and all over the world are used to this. It gets held at the post office, and then you get a little note at the door saying, not only come in and pay the duties, but you also have to pay, call it a €9 fee to clear the package.
Yes. And so, again, there's pros and cons to both, and it's usually, you know, a little bit more expensive to ship DDP versus DDU. And so from what you guys see within Passport, do you see like a conversion rate difference there? And then there's also like the repeat purchase experience as well. And so it's not just first order, but it's also lifetime value.
Yeah, so let's break it down. So first of all, I would say that the actual shipping for DDP is typically cheaper than DDU.
Okay.
The reason people think DDP is more expensive is because with DDP, you also have to pay the duties and taxes up front, right? And that could be a lot. The problem is, fine, you're gonna put the duties in the cart, you might bake it into the price of the good, and of course, price goes up, conversion rate goes down. Of course, that's known. However, if you do DDU, the consumer, and most consumers at this point, international e-commerce consumers, they're pretty savvy, so they know that those duties are going to be charged to them at some point anyways, or at least there's a high probability that they're going to be hit with those duties. And that creates anxiety for the consumer in the cart. So the price might be lower, but that anxiety drives down the conversion rate. So what we find is when a merchant switches from delivered duties unpaid to delivered duties paid, and they communicate that clearly in the cart, and they say, this order is going to have, all the duties and taxes have been prepaid already. Yes, that's a little bit more expensive in the cart, but it reduces the anxiety for the consumer. So at worst, it's a wash, and the conversion rate isn't impacted, but it actually does oftentimes increase the conversion rate, ironically, and it certainly increases the repeat purchase rate, because you're much more, you know, satisfied with the whole experience than you would have been if you had to pay duties when the item arrives in country.
Awesome. And so we keep hearing from brands, and it's the reason why we've invested heavily into our global facilities, you know, again, such as Spain, but also, you know, Canada, UK, across the EU, Australia as well, but that the global expansion is no longer optional. You were obviously way ahead of this with the reasoning behind you launching Passport in the first place and why you guys have been able to grow so well. What do you think is driving that global consumer shift and why brands are seeing the need to go global and also go global much earlier?
Totally. Well, I would say, first of all, every brand is global day one, even if they don't accept orders from international consumers. The reason they're global day one is because the internet is global. So you're going to have people from all over the world visiting your website. The question for a brand is, do you want to monetize it? How do you want to monetize it? Do you want to make it a hyper-localized experience to maximize conversion rates? Or are you okay charging everything in US dollars and only showing things in US currencies? And that's a different story. That's a crawl, walk, run story of how do you want to get to a point of full optimization, let's say. But every brand is global day one because your top of funnel is global. The URL is obviously, you know, reachable from anywhere in the world, but where do you get customers from? Instagram, you know, Meta, Google, TikTok, all of these platforms, if you look at their MAUs, monthly active users, 90% of Instagram is outside of the US. Over 90% of TikTok is outside of the US. And it makes sense when you think about it, that this country is, 330 million people? The world is 8 billion. So it would make sense that the top of funnel for most brands is going to be outside of the US.
And so you mentioned the crawl, walk, run, and how do you, I guess when you're you know, personally talking to some of these brands that are looking to expand and they're like, okay, should I start really ramping up how I go global? from the United States, or start going in region to these different countries? What are some of the things that you suggest that they look at first, and how do they accelerate that process to having kind of maximizing that success?
Yeah, one of the other big accelerants is Shopify has created an incredible toolkit to create a localized experience. And that's actually something that we do. Brands give us collaborator access to their Shopify markets, and then we go in and we configure the Shopify markets to be hyper-local for every market. So there's a convergence for customers that work with us between the crawl and the walk. The crawl used to be, just accept orders for international. You don't even need to do anything. Just have it in U.S. dollars, but just accept the order. And set it up with, a DDU solution or DDP, doesn't really matter, but just that's the crawl. The walk would have been, okay, start to collect duties and taxes up front, communicating that you're collecting duties and taxes and so forth to get credit for it. Hook up with us so that we can get your Shopify markets hyper-localized with local currencies, local marketing messaging to a certain extent as well. And then the run would have been, you're doing, let's say, $2 million worth of sales, or you have visibility to doing $2 million. That's the point, especially if you have low SKU count. That was the point where we would start recommending a brand to set up local operations and make that transition from just ShipBob here in the US to ShipBob in UK, for example.
Are there certain categories where you see, just based off of different regulations and compliance, the difficulty of going in region versus where maybe they should do cross-border for a bit longer?
It's a great question. So regulatory compliance is much simpler for cross-border. The way it works is the local governments, when you do cross-border, the way they view that is if you're, say, a Canadian and you visit the US and you go into a Walgreens and you buy some lipstick, you can do that, and you can take it back to Canada. You did nothing illegal. That's how they view cross-border purchasing. However, if you wanted to put lipstick on shelves, in Sephora in Canada, or sell it locally, import it as a B2B import, and fulfill it locally, now you're under Health Canada's overview. Okay, so now whatever every country has their own version of FDA. So if you wanted to sell items locally in Canada in that way, you would have to have Health Canada review your products, just like the FDA would, give you the license to do so, make any changes to the labeling. Quebec, it's a French-speaking province. Guess what? If you want to sell into Quebec, it has to be in French. But not if you do cross-border. If you do cross-border, nothing's stopping somebody from Quebec going on your website, buying your product, and you shipping it to that consumer in Quebec, but it's different if you do in-country. So it is a little bit more complicated if you want to sell locally.
So I know that there are a lot of nuances to the answer of this question, but between Canada, UK, and the EU, what's typically the hardest from a regulatory standpoint?
I would say that Canada is probably the hardest.
Okay.
Yeah. They're all relatively equal, but Canada's just a little bit more. There's certain popular products here. I was just talking to somebody in the audience here about some of the products, and they have, for the sugar-free, they have allulose. If you've ever heard of allulose, it's legal in America, it's not in Canada.
Okay.
So you would have to change your formulation for the Canadian market, but it is allowable in EU.
Yeah. So I want to get back to some of the operational stuff in a second, but you did mention some interesting things that you guys have rolled out and that Shopify has rolled out, especially from a technology standpoint. And so I know a lot of brands are thinking of, especially when they go global, it's, is it multi-site? Is it multi-currency? Is it multi-language? The complexity there and having everything flow to your downstream systems is extremely complex. I know through some of the stuff that you guys have launched recently, especially with your importer of record solutions and really helping people go in-country faster, paired with what Shopify has launched, which is multi-entity to a single site, which is pretty impressive. If you can maybe expand on that a little bit and how you view that as another unlock for these brands to go global, or in region even faster.
Huge announcement Shopify made. I feel like it hasn't been getting enough fanfare, to be honest with you. So the way you would set up your site to be connected to a local bank account, to be able to transact locally and have not the super expensive cross-border payment processing fees that are like 3.5%, but the local payment processing fees in UK are like 1.6%. Okay, the way you used to do that is you had to create an expansion store. That's basically a replica of your existing store, but now you have to have two of them. So any sort of marketing changes, any sort of theme changes, you had to do it on two stores, okay? Guess what? If you want to do 3 markets, Canada, UK, and US, you have to have 3 expansion stores. And we do that today, right? We do that today. We have a bunch of brands that basically ended up approaching it that way. But Shopify released a feature called multi-entity single store. Multi-entity single store. So off of one single Shopify instance, they allow you to now map transactions from the UK to a UK entity. Okay, this is one of the services that we bring to the table as a merchant of record. A brand will connect the multi-entity, our entity in UK, to their UK sales, our Canadian entity to their Canadian sales, off of one single store. It takes 15 minutes to set up, and now you can transact locally. It was a huge change for them.
That's awesome. Back to like the operational side. So when brands are going in region, what are some of the biggest things that you see them miss, and especially from going global, what are how should they really coordinate from a marketing and finance perspective as well? Because operations is kind of the linchpin between all of it.
Totally. So when you're going global, cross-border, and you're using ShipBob, you don't need to worry about it, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just like, it's as if you're shipping to another state. Do you need to worry about shipping to Alabama? Not really. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as shipping to Canada, right? We take care of everything on the shipping side up front in the cart, so it's really, really seamless. I think the biggest thing that brands neglect or need to think about is marketing and supporting, especially if you're doing in-country, because it is kind of a headache to get going, in country because of the regulatory compliance we talked about. So you want to make the most of it, and marketing is really the thing that a lot of people think that if you build it, they will come. And to a certain extent, that's true. There's a lot of afterglow from your marketing in the U.S. that somebody in Canada will see, and you'll get some orders. But if you want to make the most of it, you could take the marketing that you do in the U.S., and it does translate fairly well into English-speaking markets like Canada especially, UK to a certain extent, Australia, EU, to a certain extent. However, if you really want to make the most of it, I would recommend finding like a local agency in EU that knows that market, that knows, they say slacks in UK, like little things like that. If you say pants instead of slacks in the UK, it'll turn somebody off. It'll give them that cue that you're not really part of this local market, and that's going to hurt your conversion rates. And you're not going to make the most of all that effort that you put in to launch in UK.
And so let's talk about going across the pond over in Europe. From things like merchant of record, importer of record, value-added tax or VAT. I'm sure there's things that I'm not thinking of. Like what is typically like the long pole or takes the longest time if they don't use a solution like Passport to really fast track that?
Yeah, I mean, for somebody to get those registrations in place takes forever. And moreover, usually if you're an American merchant or a Canadian merchant, the time zone is horrible as well. So if you ever need any help, you're calling the customer support line. You have to do it in the middle of the night, for the US. So that's a long pole. The longest pole is still probably the regulatory compliance part, especially if we're talking about cosmetics brands or nutraceuticals. And it really helps to have a partner like Passport that's going to hold your hand throughout the process, quarterback the whole thing. We have relationships in the regulatory agencies in Canada and UK, so we know who to talk to and how to push things through and cut through the noise, I would say.
Yeah, and we're fortunate to work with some really cool brands together. Like Wildflower Cases is a great example of that. And we working with them in the United States and then helping them scale in the UK. If you can talk a bit about that, because I know you guys really helped them fast track their expansion over in the UK, which is a huge market for them.
Yeah, totally. So this is a perfect case study into how to approach it. So they started off US outbound with us, found a lot of success. Business started to really pick up in UK, and they were like, you know what's gonna really make this blow up is if we do local fulfillment in the UK. So let's say they're doing $1 million. Well, they could literally triple their UK revenue by lowering their shipping costs, right? Because everything is gonna be shipped out locally from the local UK DC, okay? So that's already gonna cut shipping costs, obviously cheaper to ship locally than cross-border into London. And you go from a transit time of 5 business days, 6 business days, you're going to 1 business day.
Yeah.
So you're lowering the cost of shipping, and you're shipping it so much faster. I mean, that's a different value prop, right? So just that by itself really increases the throughput for a brand like Wildflower.
Yeah, I think brands are pretty, impressed and surprised when they do go in region. Of course, there's complexity of compliance, getting all the paperwork set up, like you mentioned, managing, inventory in another country. But the reduction in fulfillment and shipping costs, and also the reduction in speed, where it's typically 1 or 2 days across, all of the UK, can obviously help them grow immensely.
Totally.
What about, what are some trends that you've seen from a global perspective lately? I know obviously you're following the tariffs and everything very closely, but what are some trends you're seeing from how brands are really going about their global footprint?
Yeah, so the US has a very high tariff regime now. That wasn't the case, before Liberation Day a few months ago. And when you have such a high tariff regime, you're questioning how much inventory, especially if you have a decent international business or you feel like you can have a decent international business. Why would you want to import all that inventory in the US, pay the US duties, and then ship it cross-border into Canada and pay now the Canadian duties? So now you're paying duties twice. Might as well either use an FTZ. Love it, by the way. Think it's a great idea. It's great for international too, by the way. Or ship it in country. So now splinter your inventory a little bit, at least, you can do, by the way, you can do, yes, UK in country, but you can also do EU from the UK. So why not ship, if 10% of your sales are to UK plus EU, why not take that 10%, avoid paying the US tariffs, ship it to UK, where the tariffs are much lower. I mean, they're like maybe single digits for most products, and then ship locally to UK and to EU from there. So that's, I'd say, probably the biggest move. For those who just can't, for whatever reason, too many SKUs, or maybe they will at some point, but they just are not able to, we have a great solution at Passport called duty drawback.
Okay.
Yeah, which it is what it sounds like. Basically, fine, pay that US duty into the US. When you ship something in Canada, we could match that shipment to the duty that you paid for it upon import and get you a refund on it. We could get you over 90% of that duty back on your international shipments. Yep. So that's another it's probably our most popular product right now, is the duty drawback.
That's great. Well, I know out of everybody out there who I follow around duties and tariffs, Alex is definitely top of the list, and so I know duty drawbacks is going to be top of mind for a lot of people, and just how to navigate a lot of this, including like splitting the inventory beforehand. Perfect. Well, Alex, really appreciate it as always. Thank you for joining us. I think we've got a breakout. Laura's going to walk us through that, and then after that we've got Bobby Morrison, the CRO at Shopify. So Alex, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Casey.